Hello everyone. So I did my AWS Cloud Practitioner exam this week, and while I was taking the exam, I realized that I felt very underprepared. And the reason for that was that I did the main thing that I did to study was watching the Cloud Practitioner Essentials course that is provided by AWS Training, the 7-hour video course that is supposed to prepare you, and I treated it as my main training material. But I found out that there's a couple of things that are not covered. So there are a couple of AWS products are being covered in the exam that are not being covered properly in the course. Also, I have to say I am not a fan of the video course because the instructor, the trainers, they change so often. Because what I think happened is they took the introductionary videos of different courses that go more into depth of about different things, and they just line them up all together, and it's very, yeah, it makes it a bit difficult to follow that the trainer changes so often. Also, all the marketing language that's being used, the product names and the pricing is just mentioned so often. It seems a bit salesy. Anyway, so I wanted to record this video to just give you my bit on how I think you can prepare for the AWS exam, for the Cloud Practitioner exam. So, two surprises mainly that I had during the exam were there were a lot of questions around the billing. So it was, well, the video course, they talk a lot about billing, but it was even more, it felt more. And then also, like I mentioned in the beginning, there more products were covered than in the 7-hour course, which is why I'm going to run you through all the products very quickly that are being mentioned in the exam. So just real quick, so I wish I had looked this up before the exam, but I only found it after. So this is what AWS say, what the exam is about. So the global infrastructure, architectural principles, the value proposition, key services, so the key products, which I'm going to run you through, um, and common use cases, for example, compute and analytics, security and compliance, billing, account management, and pricing models. As I said, one of the main things that kind of, I don't know, me as a person, when I learn something and then they mention pricing, I just take a note of, okay, it's pay as you go because it's cloud, got it. But then knowing something for me means more knowing where to look it up. So, but in this case, you really need to know some details about the actual pricing and billing. Um, and the reason for that, I believe, is that they probably want you to be able to always be able to go to your manager and say, oh, well, if we move to the cloud, it's going to be so much cheaper because this and pay as you go, and so that you can always make the business case on the spot. That's what I think. Um, and identifying sources of documentation as well as deployment and operation. And this is the split, cloud concept, security, technology, billing and pricing. It says only 12%, but for 50, sorry, what is it? 65 questions, that comes around to 7 questions. So yeah, more than I expected. Alright, so for the rest of this video, I'm going to run you through all of the products and names pretty much that are coming up in the exam. Just at really quickly, like I'm not going to give you an in-depth introduction. I just want to mention everything, and then you can take a note of it. And what I would suggest as a study strategy would be to watch the introduction of the video course because it gives you a very good introduction, but then maybe don't watch the whole course with all the details. What I would suggest is that you go through all these pages and take a note of the product names and the introductory paragraphs here. And usually, because the purpose of the Cloud Practitioner Essentials exam is to prove that you know the basics of cloud, the basics of Amazon AWS products, and also the pricing structure. So you're not expected to have deep technological knowledge, but you should just know the key features, and the key things are usually mentioned in the beginning paragraphs, literally. And they also mention how the product fits in with other products. So that would be my tip. Write down the name and then perhaps a couple of bullet points about what it is. Okay, so let's get started. So it might take me maybe 15 minutes to run through all of these. There's a lot. So let's get started. So the first one is the virtual private cloud. So what is that? That is your cloud. So what would have been previously your own little physical infrastructure, your servers and your network hardware, like routers and bridges and whatnot. If you take this to the cloud, you come up with your virtual private cloud. Now, what they say is it's a logically isolated section of the AWS cloud. So it's not physically isolated, it's logically isolated. What does come up in the exam is ways that you can connect to your virtual clouds. And there are two main ways, which are the VPN. So you might have used a VPN. You can connect from your machine to a network. So that's one way. And the other way is something called AWS Direct Connect. So if you still have your own physical network or servers and network, and you want to establish a connection to your virtual private cloud in AWS, you can use this product to establish this connection. Okay, so next, so this is one of the main products that you would put into your virtual private cloud. EC2 Elastic Compute is a virtual server. You can choose different sizes, different memory, and number of kernels, and choose your operating system. And yeah, it's elastic because it allows, well, you can choose different instances, and it can adapt to your needs. So one of the concepts that makes it elastic is auto-scaling. So let's say you have a web application with where there's a peak of users happens, I don't know, at midday, because I don't know, let's say your application, people would use it to order the lunch. Hey? So then the most traffic would happen during lunchtime, just hypothetically. And you could use, so if you have your physical hardware, then you'd have to pay to maintain that hardware at all times. But with auto-scaling and with virtual servers, you can just say, okay, in peak times, just scale up and then run more instances and more infrastructure. And that way you only pay more at your high peak times. So that's a key concept. Excuse me, I just gotta. So, oops, you can hear my fan. So about EC2, there is something that comes up in the exam is the pricing. So there's you can use EC2 in different ways as well, which are reserved instances. So if you know that you specifically know that you're going to use your virtual server with a high load, then you can use a reserved instance and have savings. So so get a cheaper price, because you take away the option of making it elastic and scale it up and down, because you know, okay, I'm going to have this much load, so that's the right pricing for you in this case. On the other hand, there's something called spot instances, again, something that comes up in the exam, which is if your application does not to be continuously run. So if you have a web server and whenever someone wants to request your service, you need to reply, then that's not the right thing. But if you have an ongoing piece of data crunching, let's say, that requires compute power, but it can be interrupted, then you can use a spot instance, because that makes use of excess compute power in AWS cloud at a cheaper price. So then you get a cheaper price, because you don't get the full availability, but you still get the compute power, just with little interruptions. There's also dedicated host, which is a fully reserved physical server if you want that. So that has different pricing implications as well. Now let's talk about store. So Elastic Block Store, or EBS, is how you store data in your EC2 instance. So if you want to extend your virtual server with storage, then you can use this. What you can also do is install your own database in your EC2 instance and use it as a database. But then, even though it's a virtual server, you need to manage all the hardware. So as we go forward, we'll see there's also database solutions that AWS offers. But then first, so Elastic Beanstalk is if you don't even want to be bothered dealing with servers, even though they're virtual, and you know, okay, I have an application that is Java, PHP, or .NET, or Node.js, you can use this service, Elastic Beanstalk, which just provisions all the hardware that is necessary to run this stack and your application in this particular stack. So then you don't need to deal with an EC2 instance with a virtual server. It's more like one level of abstraction higher, and it handles all the scaling and load balancing for you. So yeah, less dealing with setup and maintenance even. So elastic load balancing is one other way or technique that provides elasticity, which is elasticity is one of the concepts in AWS. It's mentioned in the exam questions. Here, if you have different EC2 instances or different virtual private networks, which might be duplicates of each other, and you want to connect them to just provide higher throughput, higher availability or compute power, you can use the load balancer. So then the load balancer will distribute your load between those, will distribute your traffic. Another way of making your application faster is CloudFront. So CloudFront is a content delivery network. One of the buzzwords there is edge computing. So it moves your application and whatever you're trying to provide to the client. It may be APIs or data. Let's say you're streaming videos. The closer you move it to the actual physical client where your client is requesting the service from, the faster it will be. So CloudFront will distribute your data or your service across a global network to make it faster, which is the content delivery network. So global, I believe, is one of the words that will come up in the context of questions around this. So at the outermost entry point into your whole network infrastructure, there lies Amazon Route 53, which is the domain name system or DNS web service, where you can get a domain. So if you buy a domain and then you want to redirect from that domain to your virtual private cloud, then you can use this service. Also, what Route 53 does is making your service more failure resistant by being able to perform health checks. So if your network has a health check endpoint, this service can check, is the network or the instance available? If yes, send traffic to it. If not, it knows another instance or network to send the traffic to. So it makes it more fail-safe. So AWS Shield, which is something you should have heard of. It's the denial of service protection that's built in. It comes built in EC2 instances and Elastic in the Elastic Load Balancer as well, and CloudFront and 53. It provides protection against DDoS attacks, and you can buy an advanced version and pay for it, but if not, it'll work out of the box as well. So one more thing about security, so there's also a web application firewall, or WAF. I believe it was mentioned in one of the exam questions, which provides security on the application level so things like SQL injections or cross-site scripting. And that was it for security. So now we come to storage. So there's two main ways to store things in the AWS cloud, which is block storage, which is what this is, and then databases come later. So AWS S3 is a service that stores static objects. So you can host your website, your static website, you can host in S3. So HTML files or JavaScript files or videos that you want to stream to a client. It's very durable. It's very fast and low latency. This comes up in the exam. AWS Snowball is a service that can move large amounts of data into your object storage. So this can be used to load data into AWS S3. So then the second type of object storage is Amazon Glacier, which it's cheaper because it's higher latency. So the data is very durable, but it may take longer to actually deliver the data to the client, which is why it's cheaper. By the way, when we're talking about pricing, this comes up in the exam. What determines the price of object storage is only the amount of data that you store and the amount of data that is requested and delivered to the client. What you do not pay for is uploading data into S3. So you can upload and replace data as much as you want to, but you pay only for the storage and the amount that is taken out. And then another question that comes up is, how can you get data into Glacier? You cannot just go and log into your AWS in your browser and upload the data. But there's three other ways that you can get data into Glacier, which is, one is the SDK, so programmatically from your application. Second one is via an API, and the third one is via a lifetime policy. So this service, it plugs in nicely with your S3. So let's say you have fresh data, let's say you're YouTube and someone uploads a new video and then lots of people have watched the video because it's new, but then once it becomes older, then less people are watching it. Maybe someone doesn't even watch it for a couple of weeks, but since you're YouTube, you can't just delete it. What you would then do is you would move it into Glacier, which is higher latency, but you can store more data more long term for less money. And what you can do is create a lifecycle policy that then after a certain time moves your data from S3 into Glacier. So 3 ways of moving data. Okay, so then speaking about databases, like I said, you can set up your own database in your EC2 in your virtual server, but then you need to manage it yourself. But one of the advantages of the cloud is that you don't need to manage many things. You can just use them as a service. So then what Amazon offers is Amazon Relational Database Service that takes care of all your database infrastructure and also scales it automatically. And you can you can use this service with different database types, which are Aurora, Postgre, MySQL, MariaDB, and Microsoft SQL servers. One of the questions that come up in the exam is, it is also the service can be, it's highly available, highly available, and it can create additional read instances of your database in another availability zone, which then makes it able to handle more throughput. So then Amazon Aurora is a database developed by Amazon, I believe, and it is MySQL and Postgre compatible relational database, but then it is much faster than those databases, and it also scales, I believe, because it's cloud. And what comes up in the exam is literally, I think they want you to know that it's 5 times faster than MySQL, so that you can make the business case for this. DynamoDB is then a fully managed NoSQL database, and Redshift is a data warehouse. So yeah, literally, if you know that, you pretty much know enough for the exam. To get data into your database, if you have a legacy system or infrastructure, then you can use this database migration service to migrate your data into the AWS cloud databases, which comes up in the exam. Elastic MapReduce, or EMR, is a managed Hadoop framework, so for big data crunching. You don't need to know much, you just need to have heard of it. I believe it wasn't even the topic of a question, it was just an alternative answer that was not the correct answer for the question, but then if you know all these names that come up as incorrect answers, that can give you a clue as well. It can give you help in multiple choice questions as to what is the correct answer, if you can rule it out because you know what it is. So then, talking about logging and monitoring, CloudTrail is a service that takes care of all your logging in your AWS instances. So you can do risk auditing. If someone gained access to one of your instances, you can search the logs there through the management console. So that's logging. There's also a managed Elasticsearch service where you can put all your logs, which is called Amazon Elasticsearch Service, which supports open source stacks like Kibana and Logstash. Then this CloudWatch is for your metrics, so you know how all your instances are doing. How is the autoscaling doing? Should I use autoscaling or should I not? Is the load quite constant or not? You can see all your metrics in the CloudWatch dashboard. Another product there is Kinesis Data Firehouse, which is for data streaming. Again, it doesn't come up as a topic of a question. It's an alternative answer, and if you know what it is, you can rule it out as an answer. So Kinesis collects data streams from different applications and then provides it as a highly available real-time data stream to another application. So real-time analytics is one of the keywords here. Lambda. So that is one of the main products in AWS, which is serverless. So you can run a piece of code in a backend service without even thinking about any server infrastructure. You literally just upload your code, and then you get an endpoint that you can hit a URL where you can run that code. Strangely enough, that wasn't really covered in the video course, but it's one of the things that I feel like it's very often used whenever people talk about AWS Cloud. They use Lambda, and so yeah, you can execute a function serverless. It's auto scaling because you don't need to think about servers, and it can also take then data and, for example, store it somewhere like in the S3 storage. CloudFormation, it's advanced. Just so you've heard of it, it's infrastructure as code. So rather than logging into your AWS interface in the browser and setting up everything with clicks, etc., you can describe your infrastructure as as code, which then means you can use some things like version management and also just set up your whole infrastructure, be it as complex as you want, and just redo it or create a second instance. Okay, so now talking a bit more about the billing. So this is something that comes up, the TCO calculator, total cost of ownership. So when you want to make an estimate of what it would cost to run, let's say you have an existing legacy physical infrastructure and you're thinking of getting rid of it to save costs, moving into the cloud, you can calculate what all of that infrastructure would cost in the cloud, and then you can compare it to what you're currently paying and basically make a business case with it. So that's before you adopt the cloud. When you are using AWS Cloud, you can use the Cost Explorer to monitor your costs, see how all your instances are performing, how much it costs, and do some cost optimization there. Visualize and understand and manage your costs. Then talking about security a little bit, so there's an important concept, the shared responsibility model. Yeah, one of the main concepts. So as they say, so customer and AWS share the security, the burden or the responsibility of security. And the wording is the AWS is responsible for the security of the cloud, which means they take care of the hardware security, make sure that no one has access to their physical data centers. Oh, there's some fireworks going on in the background. Physical data centers who shouldn't have access, and also the software, all the software that they manage, they make sure that it's secure. But then all the software that you write on the cloud, you're responsible. You're responsible for keeping your customer data safe, keep it encrypted, make sure to install firewalls. And if you use EC2 instances, yeah, you gotta make sure that you patch your operating system and configure your firewall. Two things that come up in terms of security are security groups, which is the firewall that can that kind of wraps your EC2 or whatever infrastructure you have and makes sure that only other applications that are allowed have access to that. And also network access control lists. You should look up that. Security groups and network access control lists. Then also this is related to security, it's identity and access management, which is where you create your users, groups, roles, and access policies. So take a look at that. You should know what those terms mean. We're almost through, we're almost at the end. Key management service is a service that can manage and control keys to encrypt your data, just so that you've heard of it. And Cognito is a service that provides the login and sign in and access control functionality to your app that you can use. Because so many applications use it, you don't need to reinvent it, you can use this service. And the last thing that I'm going to mention is the support plans, which are also a topic in the exam. There's 4 support plans: basic, developer, business, and enterprise. So a couple of pointers as to what is being asked in the exam. The developer plan only allows one primary contact, so it's literally meant for one developer. You cannot use it for your whole company. It's only one person that can submit support cases. Then we have the business, where there's unlimited contacts. By the way, they all have unlimited cases, but then the response time is a different one. So for the business plan, you get 1 hour response time for production systems, and the shortest response time is in the enterprise plan, which is only 15 minutes for your business critical systems. Let me see, is there anything else that I should mention? No, I think that's it. Alright, and thanks for bearing with that. We're through. So like I said, so my study advice for this would be watch the introduction videos of the Cloud Practitioner Essentials video course, but then don't bother too much with the details. Go through all of these. I'll provide you with the links and just take note of the names of the products and the short summary at the top of the pages, and that should pretty much prepare you. So then one thing that I did to prepare for the exam was buy this course on Udemy, which is the AWS Certified Cloud Practitioner 2018 practice questions. It was a good way to just get a feel for the types of multiple choice questions and just become fluent with the question format a little bit. As you can see, I only gave it 2.5 points out of 5. Even though I think it helped me, the quality is not very high, the quality of the questions. So there's a lot of repetition. The explanations, they're obviously just copy and paste from the AWS documentation, and also the wording, like the questions, it's often the sentences are even incomplete. So the quality is not very high, but still it might help you. I think I paid £10.99 for it if you're in the UK. So yeah, you can think about that. Alright, and that was my run through of what is covered and what I recommend you to study for the exam. So I wish you good luck in taking your exam.